Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. My name is Nyssa, and if you're new here, we are a family of 8 who live off-grid in Australia. Today's video is another food prep video, except that I put a little note in the previous video because I didn't realize until I was editing. I actually missed a couple of days in this month. So for people tuning in, we only shop every 6 weeks, and after our 6-week grocery haul I do a range of videos showing how we use, preserve, prepare, meal prep, all that sort of thing, the food that we buy from the 6-week haul, because that's what people were interested in. Now I do them in order, generally speaking, so every couple of days I just do a couple of days worth of the kitchen stuff. So I film what I do, and then every couple of days I edit it, I voice over it, write notes, voice over it, and get it sorted. Except that somehow I missed, I don't know, I'm not sure what I did, but somehow when I was voiceovering and editing, when I was doing the voiceover for the previous video, I'm sitting there going, I'm talking about pork that I minced, but I don't remember showing that in the previous video, and it's because I missed a couple of days. So every day I download all the footage from my camera onto the computer, and then I delete it because I don't have enough room. I only have one memory card and I don't have enough room on there to keep footage on there, so then I delete it and then I put the card back in the camera and things like that. And obviously I had uploaded it to the computer and then just never done anything with it. So this is actually food prep that was done prior to the most recent video. So the last one was like part 3 and this should have been part 2 or whatever. Anyway, we're just going to keep on going and pretend it didn't happen. So I'm going to call this one part 4, but yes, it's a little out of sync. So 6-week grocery shop, this is the food prep, planning, preserving and stuff. We're going to call it part 4 of February's food, and yes, we'll see how we go. So enjoy watching, and I will see you on the next one, guys. Alrighty, so we got plenty of bananas in the grocery haul, and we also got plenty of bananas in the hamper. So we've got heaps of bananas at the moment, so we're trying to use them up. One of the things I make regularly is banana bread. We freeze a lot of them because we use them for smoothies and ice creams and all that sort of stuff, but we also like to use some of them as well. So banana bread is one of my favorite things to make, and we do a chocolate chip banana bread just to make it that little bit more decadent. I make it in the Thermomix. It's really simple to make. I actually have a reel and a short, I think, on my recipe for making it. I use these jumbo Mackey's loaf tins for doing it because they're quite large. So these are meant for a jumbo loaf of bread, so a 900-gram dough base, and so they're quite large. I don't know what the measurements are, I'll have to get that at some point, but the banana bread, the single loaf of banana bread spreads out, it's quite flat in it, and that works for me because banana bread's a long cook process. Like a banana bread is a 50 to 60 minute bake, and in the barbecue with the bottom heat and all that sort of thing, it's too long, and we end up burning the bottom and the edges of it before the middle sets, because that's what happens with banana bread because it's such a moist bread. So by putting it in these larger tins, it works. I could probably put them in a slice, to be honest. I hadn't thought about it. Maybe I should try baking the banana bread in like my cast iron slice pans, my version of a 9x13 or whatever it is, and that would cook quicker as well. I'll have to try that at some point, but in the meantime I have these jumbo bread tins that I don't actually use for bread, generally speaking, that work really well for the banana bread or any sort of quick bread, zucchini breads, anything like that works really well in these. So this is what I did. So I did a double batch in the Thermomix, poured it, split it between the 2 baking tins and baked it in the barbecue. Now I get asked all the time and I forget to mention and show the barbecue, but I just have a hooded barbecue and I use upturned metal colanders on the plates of the barbecue, and then the baking utensils, so the trays or the baking tins or whatever, sit up on those upturned colanders so that there is air flow all the way around the baking tins without that direct heat on the bottom. But it still is more direct heat on the bottom than your average oven because that's just the premise of a barbecue. So anyway, double batch of banana bread into the oven as the first thing to get done that morning. After that I mixed up a batch of flatbreads. I've had a couple of people testing my recipe for the flatbreads because I did a lot of experimentation on my preferred ratios and then how I wanted to roll them and use them and things like that. So I've had a few people doing some testing on it, and all the testing is coming back good, but it has given me some other bits and pieces to be aware of that I need to write down when I do the recipes and stuff like that. So that one will go up on the website soon. I had thought, while I was thinking about that, just while I've got footage here to talk over, that people keep on urging me to do a Patreon, and I'm not a huge fan of Patreon if I don't have something to give. Like Patreon, to me, if you're paying a subscription, you should be getting something from me more than just the YouTube videos that everyone gets anyway. But I am going to need recipe testers for a bunch of things if I ever want to get it into actually a book or something. It's different going up on the website, though even then I'd still prefer if they were tested. Though I do test my recipes extensively anyway, because I just make them extensively. But I will need recipe tests and stuff too, so maybe it's about creating a community on Patreon, people who are willing to do testing of the recipes, and then they get copies of these things before everyone else, and then maybe they get pre-orders before everyone else for other things. I don't know. I'm still working on it. The shock of the income still is a little bit there, and with the buildings coming. Anyway, back to the food. So I did my flatbread dough in the Thermomix, and then I tip it out into a bowl. It proofs for only about 15 to half an hour, depending on the ambient temperature, and then I separate it into balls. There's approximately 24 to 26, 40 to 50 gram balls in each batch of this, which works out well for us. I spray them with oil, put the dough mat over them, rest them for 15 minutes. And then I cook them off. So I've started trialing cooking them in half. It's been working really well. So all I do is I roll them out in a flat circle. I spray the middle of them and fold them in half, a bit like you do with steamed bao buns. Fold them in half, and then I just cook them in half like that on the pan and flip them in a little bit of oil, so they get that crispy, crunchy outside, but the inside's nice and soft. I suppose it's taco-esque, but they're flatbreads still. They're still a soft, chewy bread. But it means I can cook like 4 to 6 on a pan at a time instead of 2 to 4. So it's definitely been a quicker cooking period, but it also means that they're just easy to stuff and eat rather than trying to roll them. And because I'm not pedantic about rolling things particularly round, sometimes rolling up my flatbreads or tortillas can be challenging. So having them in this half moon shape works quite well. We just had them with ham, cheese and tomato mayo. This was, we were using up the ham that I had gotten in the open 1 kilo bag, so the stuff that needed to be used, so that's what we were using here, and the tomatoes that had come, that I'd bought, that again needed to be used up, so that's what we had. This is what the banana bread looked like when it came out of the oven. Put it on a rack to cool while I did everything else. Once it was cooled, I sliced it up and put it into containers. This is just for ease of the kids serving themselves. If it's already sliced in a container, then they can serve themselves. In the current temperatures at the moment, I tend to put the containers in the fridge as well, because it's really quick to mold. It's a very moist bread, and if you don't refrigerate it, then yeah, it's quick to mold. And because I'm making such a big batch of it, mind you, it's still only like 4 pieces per child. Maybe 5 pieces per child in that whole lot, so it's not like it lasts particularly long, but anyway. The next thing to sort out was the rest of the box of corn. So we've eaten corn a couple of times, and we could just eat it. Like, I love corn on the cob. I love it in a myriad of ways, and I could just cook it up and eat it with every meal. But trying to get the most out of some of these things, and you know, we've got the freezer now and things like that, and hey, present me is now thanking past me for doing this, because because of this income shift and everything else, it's given me something extra in the barbecue that I wouldn't have had normally as well. Something extra in the freezer, not the barbecue, that I wouldn't have had otherwise. So I shucked it all, and then I cut some into small cobbets. Now there's 2 trains of thought in regards to blanching the corn. A lot of people say you don't have to, and you can just freeze it straight as. That it probably works perfectly fine. But this corn I didn't grow. It came from the fruit and veg store. I have no idea how long from the point that it was picked to this point now that it's been sitting there. So for me, it made sense to give it a blanch before freezing it, just to give it a good clean, make sure there's nothing on it, and then it's going to go in the freezer, and then from the freezer it will be steamed or roasted or whatever for us to eat. So all I did was briefly blanch it before freezing it. So brought a pot of water up to boil, tipped it all in the pot, pulled it out, and then stuck it in vacuum seal bags, vacuum sealed it up, and stuck it in the freezer. It vacuum sealed it in like sets of 8 cobbets, so there's a cobbet each in a meal, so I think I ended up doing 3 meals worth of those, so that'll be nice to have. And then with the rest of the ones that were left, I decided to make the seasoned corn kernels. Now we use this in a few things. It's really nice in tacos, it's really nice on nachos, it's nice in like salad, like a warm salad. So I use this in a few different ways, and it's always nicer using fresh corn than anything else, though you can use frozen corn with it. It does work okay, but it's always nice to have fresh corn. So I got all the kernels off the corn cobs as the first thing. So what I do is I use a nice sharp knife, and I get a nice wide bowl, and then I have a smaller bowl upturned in the middle, and I put the cobs on the small bowl and then slice the kernels off, and the kernels fall into that wider bowl. This is the easiest method I found. I know there's tools that you can buy and things to slice all the kernels off, but I've never owned one, and I find this pretty simple to do anyway. Once I had all the kernels off, I season them. I use some garlic powder, a bit of lime or lemon juice, a bit of oil, smoked paprika, salt and pepper, that sort of thing, and then very briefly fry them off. Get a little bit of colour on them and then warm through. Similar sort of premise as blanching them, just giving them that brief cook before I freeze them. So I cooked them off in 2 batches so that they were just getting that heat through without, you know, simmering in their own juices. I could have canned this corn before pre-seasoning and stuff, but there's not really enough there to make it worthwhile for me. This is only going to be 2 meals worth of corn, and the corns on the cob ended up being 3 meals or 4 meals, however many I did. But if I had have taken all the kernels off and filled jars with them, I would have only got a few jars, and it's just not worthwhile for me. Not when I can buy tin corn as cheap as I can. And the kids can sit there and eat an entire tin of corn as just a snack. Or if I'm making food, quite often I put 2 whole tins of corn on the food and things like that. So unless I could get corn extraordinarily cheap, this was fairly cheap. It was $10 for a box, and I think there might have been, it may have even been 20 cobs in there, so it may have only been 50 cents a cob, which is actually pretty cheap. But I would have needed like quite a few boxes to make it worth my time to get all the kernels off and then can it all. So it's not something I would generally do, because I find it hard with the whole 6 weekly shop not planning exactly what I'm going to get. Like if I had have got there and realized it was that cheap, I didn't really have enough space or enough ideas of what I would do with it. But it's the sort of thing that I could have grabbed a box, gotten home and realized, and then gone back and grabbed another 6 boxes if I lived locally. But because I don't, sometimes I have to make those decisions spur of the moment, and I just can't make them that easily. Like it's, yeah, anyway. So I did that. I also briefly cooked off the cobs in that seasoned pan, because the pan's got the oil and the seasoning in it. So I briefly cooked off the cobs in that seasoned pan, because I'm going to use these to make the base for a chowder for winter. I really love like a corn and potato, sometimes with seafood, sometimes with chicken, a chowder, a creamy soup. And the taste of that corn cobs in cooking off the stock, in the like creating a stock with the corn cobs, however you want to call it, is really, really tasty. So by cooking them off slightly in the heat and then vacuum sealing them, I've got those cobs to use for making that chowder base later on when it's a bit cooler and we're eating soups again. I sealed up the cobs for the freezer and then split the kernels between 2 bags for the freezer as well. So as I said, I only got 2 lots of meals out of the kernels, and I think it was 3 or 4 of the cobs out of that. For dinner that night, I made pastizio. I had the bolognese in the fridge that I had run out of containers for. So when I made that big batch of bolognese, normally I freeze it in gallon Ziploc bags, because that takes up the least amount of room. And it fits 1.2 to 1.5 kilos of bolognese in that Ziploc bag. And then when we have a meal of it, we also add a jar of my canned pasta sauce, which has zucchini and onion and carrot. It's a pressure canned tomato-based pasta sauce. But I ran out of gallon Ziploc bags. I normally buy them off Amazon, and I just hadn't done it, and I didn't realize I was out, or I could have bought some from Costco, which are a very comparable price, Costco and Amazon. I just have Prime, so I get free shipping on Amazon, so it works out much the same price, but I didn't realize I was run out. So I used a whole bunch of Tupperware to put the bolognese in the freezer, but we don't have a whole lot of Tupperware. It's something we use for leftovers, but it's not something we freeze in a lot because it takes up a lot of room in the freezer. We have the bigger freezer now, so we have more options there. I'm still debating what I'm doing, whether I want to buy some of the containers from Amazon purely for freezing stuff in, but anyway, that's all beside the point. But one of the containers that I use for bolognese ended up having like 2.5 kilos worth of bolognese in it. So that was too big a container to freeze in one go because it would be more than a meal. So for dinner, I decided to cook up a pasticcio with that extra bolognese. So I cooked up a couple of bags of macaroni. Traditionally it's done with a penne. We didn't have any penne. Macaroni works fine for us. You mix egg whites through the cooked macaroni as the bottom layer of the tray. There's some recipes that have cheese and stuff in it too. We don't use dairy, so there's no cheese in mine, but the egg whites work to hold it together a little bit. And then I put a thick layer of bolognese on after that, and then I add a white sauce. So it's the white sauce that I made in the Thermomix. It's a pretty standard white sauce recipe for me. I get asked for the recipe for my white sauce and cheese sauces a lot, and I'm working on it. The problem with the white sauces and cheese sauces is I have a tendency to just throw everything into the Thermomix and let it go, and I don't take a whole lot of notes of what I'm putting in. So I'm trying really hard to make sure I take note of the ratios of the spices and everything that I add before I share them, because otherwise it's not going to work. So this is a standard dairy-free white sauce made on coconut cream, but the difference with the pasticcio is that you use egg yolks in the white sauce. So once the white sauce is cooked up, you add some egg yolks through it, and they cook in the residual heat. So you've used the whites in the pasta and then used the yolks in the white sauce. So yeah, added the yolks to the white sauce and then put the white sauce over the top of the pasticcio, and it's sort of similar to a lasagna, but it's done with that base of pasta rather than having the layers of pasta and meat and that. It's Greek, I think, if I remember correctly, and mine's probably far from traditional, but it's really tasty. And it's baked. So the white sauce goes on top and that gets put into the barbecue to bake. If you were a cheese eater, you could put cheese on top. We don't, but because of the egg yolks in that white sauce and stuff, it actually gets a little bit crispy on top and looks a bit like it's got cheese in it, which is really nice and tasty. So the next day, we'd eaten the majority of a tray and a half for dinner of that pasticcio. So we heated the half a tray that was left in the barbecue up for lunch the next day. So we had that as leftovers for lunch that day. And then I'm gonna pause for a second and show you and bring this video up because I've got the geese have decided to walk behind me and say hello. So. So yeah, I just thought I'd share that while I was doing this. So anyway, so yes, we heated the half a tray that hadn't been eaten up before lunch, and then I was freezing the rest of the tray. So normally I wouldn't make 3 trays of it, but we had that excess bolognese. Normally I'd only make 2. We'd eat most of it for dinner, leftovers the next day. But because I had that excessive amount of bolognese, I made 3 trays. So with that third tray, what I did was I put it in the freezer. So the beauty of pasticcio is that, like lasagna, once it's chilled, it comes out in slabs. So I just cut it into 4 and vacuum sealed each quarter up and then put it in the freezer. And then that way, this might be something that could be used for a lunch meal or as a side, or it could be used for Darryl when I'm away, or a variety of different things. So the idea is that it's vacuum sealed in the freezer, it will be good for ages. It's in a shape that can be put straight into the baking tray. So even if we want to cook the whole 4 pieces up again, it'll fit into the baking tray and go in the barbecue to be reheated. The next thing to do was use some of the pork. So I bought 2 of the pork roasts. This is the first one. I first needed to mix up some seasoning for my pork. So I do like a sweet and smoky rub that I do on my pork roasts. I made some brown sugar first because I didn't have any, which is just raw sugar and molasses. So raw sugar in the Thermomix, molasses, get it mixed well, and you've got brown sugar. So I made a decent amount of that and put it in a jar so that I had it there to use for a variety of things. And then I mixed up the rub for the pork in the same bowl. So because that bowl's already dirty with the molasses and the sugar, I mixed up the same thing. So I use a sweet and smoky mix of brown sugar, smoked paprika, garlic, onion, mustard powder, salt, pepper, all that sort of thing. And I made up a big batch of it as well, seeing as I had just made the brown sugar, and put it into a jar as well so that I've got it there and don't have to make it next time I want to use it. Then I cut a big chunk off the roast to cook. Now normally I would use my smoker, but unfortunately it died recently. And until we work out money situation again, it's low on the list to replace. I do have a grill thing that Mum bought me for Christmas, the Christmas before last, that we haven't mastered using yet, and I'll have to put more effort into. But for the moment I just used the barbecue. It just meant that we had to foil it for the second half of the cook so it doesn't get too dry, and keep an eye on the internal temperature and things like that. But it worked out okay. So I removed the rind off the piece that I wanted to cook, took the ties off it, removed the rind, and then retied it all back up. Then I cover the roast in mustard. I use Dijon mustard. I haven't made any lately. I'm using a jar of it at the moment. And then coated it in the rub. So the mustard goes on, and that helps keep the pork moist, but also helps keep the rub on. And you get this like crust with the mustard and the rub, and it's very, very tasty. I really like mustard though. So if you're not a mustard lover, you may not find it as tasty, but you know. So covered it in the rub as well, and then put the probe in to be cooked, and I put it on a rack over a tray in the barbecue, and as I said, I put foil in it for the second half of the bake, so I let it get nice and brown and crispy, the rub to get sort of, you know, crispy around it, and then foiled it as well. I cooked to an internal temperature of about 63 Celsius or 145 Fahrenheit, which is classed as rare for pork. Now, pork is a red meat, so you're allowed to eat it rare. It's a fairly new thing though. You used to have to cook the crap out of it to eat it. Like it was sort of treated like chicken, but it's not actually a white meat, it's a red meat. So you can eat it rare, and a roast like this is perfect rare. If you pull it out, you let it rest, when you slice it, it just melts in your mouth. So once it hit the right temperature, we pulled that out. But while I was cooking that, I also filled a tray with potatoes. So I just cut up the small red potatoes that I buy from Costco, covered it in the pieces of the rind that I had taken off, and popped that in the barbecue as well. So that rind is going to, the lard is going to render off the rind and fall into the bottom of the tray. The potatoes are going to cook in the lard, and then the rind is going to go crispy on top as well. The other half of the roast I cut into chunks and put it in the freezer for a little bit to get it nice and cold before I minced it. This is what everything looked like cooked. Now the temp was lower than normal for the rind because the roast was in there too. So normally I would cook the roast in the smoker, and I'd put the potatoes and the rind in the barbecue on their own and crank the temperature up because you want the rind nice and crispy. Because I had the pork in there as well, the temperature of the barbecue was a bit lower than I would normally cook the rind at, so it's not quite as crispy. There's some chewy bits in there, but that's fine. The kids and I don't eat it really because there's too much issues with my teeth and my face, but Darryl and the kids will eat it. And what they don't eat will be treats for training the dogs in the next couple of days. I let the pork rest, covered in foil still. After a while, I sliced it all up for ease of serving. So I just sliced it all up into nice thin slices because I have better knife skills than anyone else in the house. So it goes further if I'm the one who slices it, because I slice it up fairly uniformly and thin. And then I put it all back in the tray where all the juices were so that it could sit in its own juices, absorb them, put the foil over it, and just let it sit for the moment. I needed to get that other half of the pork done before I served dinner because I'd stuck it in the freezer so it would chill, but I didn't want it to freeze. I just wanted it chilled. So I pulled that out, put the mincer together. I have the Louvel mincer. It is amazing. I always rave about it. It's really low power draw, high powered. Putting it together and pulling it apart is super simple. I really, this was one investment that I'm super happy with. And it takes next to no time to, so this is like 3.5-4 kilos of pork, and it takes like a minute a kilo. It's so quick. So I just ran all the pork through the mincer. I just do it on a coarse grind, single grind through. So all the pork in the mincer. And stuck it back in the fridge for dealing with the next day, which is the pork mince that I've been talking about in the last video. So, you know, we're time jumping here. This is what dinner looked like. So we had the roast, the potatoes that we'd baked, steamed veg, and I heated the garlic bread that we got free from the butcher in the air fryer. So when we went to the butcher, they had a thing that you could get, if you spent $50, you got 2 garlic breads free. So I cooked both of them up in the air fryer to have with dinner and served that as well. And then we made some gravy up and poured it over as well, because everything tastes good with gravy. So that was another couple of days of food prep. I got corn in the freezer, I got leftover pastizio in the freezer, that pork minced for the next couple of days with our time jumping and all that sort of thing. And yeah, so lots done, lots sorted for meals for later on in the month, as well as the current eating as well, which is always the aim, is to make sure that all the food is used in a way that the geese are walking behind me back the other way now. All the food is used in such a way that it's there available for next for eating throughout the month. I'm distracted by them all wandering behind me. I'm lucky they're not hissing at me. So yeah, all the food is set up, ready to go for later on in the month, and all the meals that were served were worth eating and all that sort of thing. So anyway, that was the next couple of days of food prep, and I will see you on the next video. The next videos will probably be to do with the construction of the new buildings and things like that. So I'm not sure how I'm putting them together or anything else, or whether they will come out next, like chronologically, or whether they'll take me some more time to work on and the next one will be food. I'm not sure, but we'll get what we get. So thank you so much for joining me again, and I will see you on the next video.